Right, so we've had the first return of this series. I don't know if you remember, but we flipped this Voodoo Aizen a couple of episodes ago. Now I sold it to a guy that was going to be using it to do a charity bike ride, and I received a message from him, quite a blunt message actually. The message went along the lines of, "You could have told me that the bike was total before you sold it to me," which got me really confused because I thoroughly tested this bike before selling it to them. Now, when I do the handover for my second-hand bikes, I always make sure to get the buyer to thoroughly inspect the bike, to ride it, and then to state that they're happy. Now, I don't show them on here to protect people's privacy, but I always record it just to make sure that if anything like this does happen and someone, say, comes to me and says you've done something wrong, the bike wasn't as described, I've always got that evidence to come back at them and say, well, you know, you said that you were happy with the bike. Now, I think most people, especially if the bike is sold as seen, would just ignore a message like this, or at least just bat it off. But the thing is, we're trying to do something good with this challenge. I'm trying to bring life back to bikes that maybe are in not the best condition, and any profit that we generate, I'm trying to do some good with that as well. So the aim of this challenge is to buy an e-bike for my dad, so me and him can go out riding again, and any remaining profit to donate to some charities that I'd like to support. So I think it would be wrong in the spirit of this challenge to just palm that person off and not do anything about it. The other thing as well is I'm no bike mechanic. I've made this perfectly clear throughout the challenge that I'm still learning, and so as part of that learning I want to understand if I've done something wrong, what's actually happened and how can I not do it in future. So I messaged them back and I asked them to explain the problem in a little bit more detail, just noting the fact that I tested the bike and there was no problems when it left here, and they also got to test ride the bike and they said that they were happy with it when they took it. So they messaged me back and they said that there was multiple problems with the gears. They said that the chain was skipping on the cassette and that also the chain was skipping off the chainring here. And so in that light, I decided to take the bike back. Now, I don't know if you remember, there was a clip in the last video, which I'll just replay here.
As you can see, it doesn't look right. It's just way too high. You can't actually get this any lower.
So essentially, I wasn't sure if this front derailleur was correct. I think it was meant to be the mount-on derailleur. And so in that instance, I decided that I was going to take the bike back off them. Before I did that, I messaged them and asked if they could send me a photo of the bike in its condition and also honestly tell me the mileage that it'd done, because what I didn't want to have happened is for them to have used this in a charity bike ride event, rode 40 miles on it, essentially trashed it, and then be wanting to just return it. So they sent me an image and they said, you know, I've only done a couple of miles on it, and I could see from the photo that the condition pretty much was as when I sold it, bar a couple of things which I'll go into a minute that I wasn't best impressed about. But anyway, they brought the bike back and I gave them their money back. I also gave them a couple of beers as well, just to essentially say sorry, you know, maybe I was in the wrong, I'm not quite sure, but sorry for your trouble about having to go back and forth. Now, a few of you might think that I'm being a bit of a pushover by accepting a return on this bike. And the thing is I've always been given the advice, and I've always tried to follow this advice when I've been doing any kind of business, that even if you're not sure who's in the wrong, and even if it costs you a bit, it's always best to just try and be a professional and do the right thing. And I think in this case, the right thing to do was to accept the bike back. I think actually I'm going to try and turn it on its head and make this an opportunity to really bring the bike up to the condition that I wanted to, fix a few of the little mistakes that people have mentioned in the comments, and maybe even sell this for a little bit of profit as well. So in this video, I'm going to go through, diagnose the issues, try and fix them the best I can, and we're going to see if we can generate some extra profit.
Okay, so the basis of me allowing them to return the bike was that it was in exactly the same condition as when they bought it. However, there is a couple of things that they didn't tell me, but we're probably going to have to sort out anyway. So first of all, they didn't tell me that they'd attempted to try and fix the drivetrain. And in doing so, they completely frayed this cable. As you can see, I've tried to twine it back together. I think they might have also potentially stripped this bolt as well, which would be really annoying if they have done that and then not told me. They've also sprayed the drivetrain down with some sort of WD-40, I think, because there's all residue back here, and that certainly wasn't there before. I think they've also done the same here as well on the front derailleur. However, we are going to have to replace all this anyway, so I'm not too bothered about that. I also thought it was a great opportunity for me to replace the headset, because that's one thing that we didn't do before. I've got some nice cheap bearings for that. I've also noticed as well that although I did a bit of a lower leg service on this fork, you can see there's a lot of grease coming through those seals. So I think these dust seals are worn out, and I've managed to find some this time. I've got a pretty short delivery window, so I'm going to order those and then we'll fit those to the bike as well. So I'm going to start with the drivetrain problems, particularly at the back here. I'm just going to try and see why it's skipping on the cassette. I think it could be one of a couple of different things. Unfortunately, because they've played with this, the gears are all out of index now, so I'm going to just very quickly re-index them and make it so I'm able to change gear on the back.
Okay, so one really quick way I've found to adjust the gears so it gets it roughly in the right place. I don't know where I learnt this, to be quite honest with you, but I'm going to try and bring the chain down into the second gear. So I'm going to bring it down to gear 2, and then I'm going to release all the tension from the gear shifter, so there's no more tension, and then I'm going to loosen this bolt here, then pull that through, pull it taut, just give it a quick nip up, and so that roughly gets it in the right place. So I've also realised they've really played with everything on this, including the limit screws now, because if I bring it up into the highest gear, you can hear that. Yeah, I'm going to stop that before it gets caught in the back wheel. You can hear that the derailleur wants to go into the spokes, which it most certainly wasn't doing that before. So I need to play around with the limit screws because they've clearly messed around with that as well. Okay, so that's indexed to a reasonable standard now, so I can go outside and actually test this, just see whether it's skipping on the cassette or skipping on the chain rings. Okay, so from the footage that I've just taken outside, it looks like it's skipping on the cassette. And actually it's interesting because somebody did comment on the last video that I probably should have replaced this when I replaced the chain. But yeah, well done for recognising that. So I'm going to take this off now. I've got a replacement one, and we'll see if that fixes the issue. I'd already loosened that, by the way. Let's take that off here. It's already got some pretty fresh grease on it as it is, but I'll just put a little bit of this anti-seize compound on. Line up the big groove to the big slot. Slots on nice and easy. So this has got to be done up to 40 Newton meters, which the little torque wrench that I bought in the last episode won't cover. So I've got my automotive torque wrench. Listening for the click. There we go. So as I've mentioned, the front derailleur is not correct. As you can see here, this is a clamp-on mount one, and this was the lowest that I was able to get it. The front derailleur should be about 2 to 3 millimeters above the biggest chainring, and as you can see, that's way more than that. So the consequence of that was that the chain kept coming off. So that's my bad completely. I think really lucky here that the chain didn't come off and cause some serious injury. And that is the risk with bike flipping. You've got to be really careful that you don't do something wrong and cause somebody some serious injury. Anyway, what I've done is to go and find a direct mount one. Now it's quite interesting with this derailleur because right now it's bottom pull, which means that the cable comes underneath the bottom bracket and then up and then pulls the derailleur that way. Now, when I was doing the research to try and find what should go here, I was after a direct mount that could cope with a 2-speed 22 tooth to 36 tooth chainring. And there was only one that I could find, but it wasn't bottom pull, which I thought was strange. It's front pull, which is basically where the cable comes from the front here. And I was thinking, well, that's just not going to work because of all the cable routing. It doesn't look like you can do front pull. However, having looked at some images online, it seems like this bike actually originally came with a front pull, which utilises the cable routing through here and then essentially comes across and pulls from there. I don't think it's going to look at all pretty, but it's what we've got to work with right now. Right, so this looks a lot more promising. So there's a slot that runs through here, and then we set the height using the screw here. Hopefully it's not been cross-threaded. Right, that looks like the height set perfectly. Now I've just got to set the cabling up. Right, so that's all set up now. Working quite nicely, that. So I've just been taking the fork apart to get to the seals, and as I was popping this up, one of these springs flew out, smacked me in the chest. So definitely be careful when you're disassembling these. But what I have noticed is that these springs are absolutely caked in gunk. No wonder the fork sounds pretty rusty. So I'm going to get these cleaned up, get them re-greased, and then put them back in when I do the replacement of the seals. Much better. The commenters in the last episode recommended that I replace the bearings because they are really cheap, and I ended up getting a pack of 10 of these for £5. And in previous episodes, when you've seen me replacing the bearings, you've seen me squeezing the hell out of this packet of grease here, which isn't the most efficient way of doing things. So I've gone ahead and bought one of these grease guns, which will hopefully make these sorts of jobs a lot easier to pack the bearings full of grease to stop water ingress and hopefully preserve their life. Just working out how to fill up this cartridge. I think if I maybe put this upside down on the packet of grease, can I actually squeeze that without making too much of a mess? Ah, nice, okay. So that's filled up with a decent amount of grease. Screw on the lid. And then we've got to prime this with like a screwdriver or something like that. Now I have actually left a link to this in the description if you do want to grab one of these for yourself. Now I'm not actually going to bother to wipe any of this down because this is all the brand new grease that I put in before. However, you can see that I really didn't put in very much. So we're not going to be stingy this time. I'm going to put in a load more using this grease gun. It's so much easier just to press the little lever and it gets a load of grease in there rather than trying to wring the neck of the the little packet that you get the grease in. Now the bearings in, so put a little bit more grease. Bit of a mess, but I'd rather have too much than not enough. And just nip these up using the torque wrench that I bought in the last episode. There you go, that's one. And that's two. Those bearings sound so much better now they've been packed with grease. Wow. Okay, so these brake rotors are squealing really bad, so I think they've been contaminated. Now I did do this when I had the bike before, but I'm not sure if something's been sprayed on there. So you have to go in, you're gonna have to go back in with some sandpaper. See that, all that grime coming off there. Thanks to the commenter as well that told me about buying Automotive's brake part cleaner instead of the bike stuff, because normally a can of about 400ml is about £7 or £8 for the bike stuff, but this was £5 for 750ml. As you can see, a much bigger can. Another criticism on the last episode was me using the cable cutters to cut the zip ties and leaving a sharp edge on. So I've gone and bought these mini side cut pliers, which ironically I've got to use the cable cutters to get the zip ties off. That should leave a much cleaner edge, so it isn't as sharp and gets caught on stuff.
Okay, so the bike is now complete. As you can see, it looks quite a lot nicer, doesn't it, with that brand new cassette on the rear and the new front derailleur there. And I think pretty much the only thing left to do is to take some nice photos, get the listing online, and then while I wait for the bike to sell, I'm going to get it out on the road and give it a good test, make sure everything works, make sure it's all feeling solid for the next owner.
Gears aren't skipping at all now, which is great. So that clearly was what the problem was. Right, so that is riding a lot better now. And as you can see, no gunk coming up from under the seals. Gears are shifting nicely. The only one thing is the brakes are a little bit squealy still. So I don't know, maybe that just needs a little bit more cleaning. but they stopped fine enough. It's about to rain now, so I'm going to get out of here before I get the bike too muddy. Okay, so the bike has sold, but first of all, what did we spend on it? Now, I don't know if you remember in the last episode, we ended up spending about £147.32. That's including the cost of the bike originally. So we were that much into the bike before, but I'm only going to talk about the parts that we spent in this episode, and I'll just add it on to that £147. So the front derailleur I got on an offer actually. It was meant to be about £20, but in the end I spent £15.47. The bearings, I got a pack of 10 for about £5, so I think it works out about £1 worth of bearings. The cassette I had to pay a little bit more for because I wanted the faster delivery, and that came to £17.85. And the fork seals were £12.08, which brings our total spend to £193.72. So if you remember, we sold it for £190 in the last episode. So effectively, if we did the same right now, I'd be making a £3.72 loss, which is not ideal. So I had to try and list the bike a little bit higher in value. And unfortunately, it was kind of the bad time to be doing this because the school holidays in the UK have just come to an end. And so the demand for bikes has gone down a little bit. And so the bike was listed for about a week before I got any serious offers. But eventually I did get 2 offers. So in the end, I sold it for £170. However, before you despair too much, I did also get a part exchange as part of that deal as well. We can use that part exchange to flip or use for parts in the next episode. Now, I thought this episode was really important to make because there's a lot of content out there on the internet around bike flipping that makes it out like it's just easy money all the time. And the reality is that yes, there is quite a lot of reward to be had out there if you know what you're doing, but there is also risk that comes with that reward. And a lot of you have commented that you have found inspiration in this series and this challenge to start your own bike flipping journey. And so I think it would be disingenuous of me not to show those risks. And 2 of those risks have appeared today. So there's always the risk of return. Somebody, although yes, probably legally I didn't have to accept the return because the bike was sold as seen. I think it's just based on your principles and whether you want to deal with the hassle and potentially the negative reviews that might come with not accepting a return on something that you genuinely did wrong, which in this case was actually the reality. And the second risk, of course, is that you're not always going to make money on this. I bought this bike thinking that it was a great deal when I bought it for £60, but it needed a lot doing to it. And I think I'd have had to cut quite a few corners in order to make it as profitable as the other bikes that we've flipped in the series. So while on paper, we've made a £23 or so loss, and I think that brings our cash pot to £442. We do now have a bike that can be used to flip in the next episode. And if you want to find out what that bike is, you'll have to wait until then. But I'll tell you now, it does need quite a lot of work doing to it. Anyway, I put out a community poll a couple of weeks ago just to kind of get an idea as to what people might do in this scenario. And I purposely didn't give too much context around it because I just wanted a blank slate just to see what people thought. I'd be interested to know, and do comment down below if you did comment on that poll, if you would have changed your answer now having seen this episode and seen the context surrounding it and knowing that I did actually make a mistake here. I'd also be interested to hear if you think I did the right thing here and if there were some other options that maybe I could have explored instead. Now, if you want to watch more episodes in this series, make sure to click the series playlist here. And if you're all caught up but you want to be notified when the new episodes come out, make sure to click the subscribe button here. Thank you very much for watching.